currently there's a word that people are using, which is almost feel like a buzzword: authentic leadership, authentic self. A lot of people are using the phrase authenticity, but not actually showing any sort of authenticity. I'm a big fan of servant leadership. I'm a big fan of having your heart, compassion in your leadership. That's why I love that. And that's not for everyone, but it works for me. And I think when it comes to humility, I think it's about not trying to be that phrase, the sage on the stage when people want a guide by their side. You want to be someone that people can look up to without actually having to look up to. For me, humility looks like asking questions. Just because you know doesn't mean you should do. There's a wisdom in sitting back. There's a wisdom in observance. There's a wisdom in actually not going first. And I think now I enjoy that. So again, humility looks like allowing others to go before you.
You're listening to the Life and Leadership Podcast, where leaders from across the globe share openly about the trials, triumphs, and lessons learned along the leadership journey. Whether you're a seasoned, new, or aspiring leader, get ready to receive powerful insights and practical takeaways to help you grow in your leadership. And now, here is your host, Mary Eniolu.
Welcome to the Life and Leadership Podcast. Today, I have got Stephanie Ezechukwu with me, who started her career as a court clerk and has worked her way up to become the head of Prosecutions and Quality at Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, Department for Transport. She leads the litigation and prosecution work within DVSA and oversees 3 teams within the Enforcement Directorate. She's responsible for representing the agency's interests in a number of criminal and regulatory matters heard at the Magistrate Court, the Crown Court, Court of Appeal, and public inquiries. She's mom to a newborn baby, and it's a delight to have her on the Life and Leadership Podcast today. Stephanie, it's such a delight to have you and to finally get to sit down and have this conversation with you.
Thank you.
I always start off by asking our guests to just tell us a little bit about their journey and how they got to where they are today.
So, where do I begin? I guess I'll start by saying I'm from London. I grew up in London, a place called Wembley, Brent, Northwest London, if anyone knows it. And yeah, I guess my journey begins with university. I went to university, studied law at undergraduate level and did a postgrad in law as well. My very first job was a charity fundraiser. I was on the streets with a big bucket asking for money for one of these children's charities. And that kind of sums me up a little bit. I'm a little bit bold, a little bit brave, a little bit loud, a little bit annoying, on the streets, asking questions, like pushing, but often getting the results, getting donations. And yeah, my first proper job, professional job, was working in a court in central London. So my first ever job worked in the Ministry of Justice. I worked for HMCTS, and that is Her Majesty's, well now His Majesty's, Courts and Tribunal Service. That was my first job. I was literally an admin officer, churning out emails, letters, court orders, really basic, very basic admin job that I was doing. But that first job was also the first time that I managed and actually got into a position of what I now would call leadership, managed a group of court clerks. And these were all people who worked with judges, who helped to facilitate the court cases that were going on. And yeah, that was my first ever time, I guess, being exposed to decision making. And yeah, having to be decisive and having to, track performance and, respond to complaints and things, deal with customer service properly. And I would say around that time, I must have been around 23 years old. So I was quite new, quite young in that position. Fast forward 10 years, I've done quite a few jobs before. I've been in the civil service all my life. I've done many jobs. Most of them have been legal jobs, working in asylum and immigration. Others have been policy jobs, working in hate crime, domestic abuse. Currently, I work as the head of Prosecutions and Quality for Department for Transport. It's an agency within that department. It's called Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency. DVSA is the acronym. And yeah, I've been there for 3 years. I absolutely love it. And I oversee 3 different teams. One is a legal team. One is a MOT disciplinary team. So we basically write to garages that are, not representing brand DVSA very well, I'll say.
Right,
And
right.
the third one's a quality team who basically deal with the quality of our casework and our investigations. So that's my job. I don't do much of it right now. I'm currently on maternity leave. I have a newborn baby son, so
Oh,
that's very exciting at the moment, but also why my days are very much relaxed and very, just I want
you
to say very
deserve it.
easy, but not easy. But yeah, I'm not dressed for court anymore. I'm dressed for home, dressed for the baby,
Yes.
dressed for feeding, dressed for nappies and nappy changing. But yeah, that's in a
That is amazing. About 10 years ago, you got your first main job.
yeah.
Somehow you managed to land a leadership role. How did that happen?
Um, Funny, very, very funny because when I worked in the courts, I was basically trained on what they call back office work. It's all court orders. So if you've ever been to court, if you've ever put in a claim form, there's a process that is dealt with behind.
Mm-hmm.
It's court
Mm.
listings, applications, all these things that is being dealt with by a team of admin officers. But I guess from doing that, I just did it really well. I was just really energized. I have a habit of whatever I do, I love it. Whatever I do, I treat it like the most important job in the world. I don't
Mm.
play around with my work. I take my work very seriously. And I know a judge picked up on that sort of energy, that sort of like, I'm going to call it interest, enthusiasm. And he basically singled me out for what I recognize now as a promotion, but at the time was just an opportunity. He
Mm.
said, you should give her a chance doing some more business support work, some managerial work, so she can take on some other officers under her wing. I was still new. I was one of the youngest people
Exactly.
there, but I recognized now what I had was enthusiasm, bundles of enthusiasm. I worked really, really hard. And from there, an opportunity arose. Actually, quite sadly, my manager at the time got sick. She got better, obviously, but she was unwell. And when she was unwell, I became the stand-in and I started doing her
Mm.
job. And it was
Ah,
interesting, Mary, because I did that job until I moved on and got a promotion, but I wasn't paid more money for that job. I wasn't paid a higher grade. I was on the same salary doing my manager's job and my job. Didn't
wow.
complain because I saw it as an opportunity. And for me, my first ever job, I was just happy to be there. Just happy to get paid. It's almost like, I don't know, some people would call it a naivety, but actually it's an innocence and a humility, I would call it now. When
Mm.
you start, the energy and the fire you have, it's almost a zeal to just do really well. And at the time, I mean, I would come in like at 8 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes I'd leave at 6, half 6. I wouldn't care because my most important thing at that time was work. I say most important. I'm a Christian. Obviously, God is the most important in my life. But in terms of what I was doing with my time, it was always
Mm.
work. Coming in early, getting things done. And this kind of fact feeds into the rest of like how I see my work now, protecting the brand, protecting the court, trying to support customers, trying to support courts, colleagues, trying to make sure that people have a good experience being in court because I could see, we all know if you've ever been to court, it's very
Mm-hmm.
stressful. It can be
Absolutely.
very, very uncomfortable, especially if you come by yourself as a litigant in person. So when I was, standing in as the court manager, I just saw it as how can I make people's experience of court today better? And it worked, from that.
It
I think I
absolutely
leveraged that
worked.
and was able to get a promotion outside of the court into another role, more money and everything. And it kind of went from there. But that's what I've always done. I've always shown great energy and enthusiasm for what I do. And that's always
Mm.
by other people.
Well, it's certainly paid off. It's certainly paid off, honestly, because you say, well, now you recognize it was a promotion, but at the
Mm,
time you just saw it as an opportunity.
yeah,
And I always say to people, if you will treat every open door as a possibility,
yeah,
you will have more opportunities in your life. And that
absolutely.
attitude, I think that's probably the first thing that I'm going to glean from everything you've talked about already. Just having that positive, vibrant
Mm,
attitude of this job is probably not my end, it's not
yeah,
my ideal, but it's what is
yeah.
before me right now, and I'm going to give it my best. And that attitude obviously is paid off because people do
Mm,
notice. People do notice. I mean, they say if you just do enough, you will always just
mm,
get by. But
yeah.
you were doing more than enough. And so, opportunities just come, doors just
Yeah.
open because you outgrow your current position. The quickest way to get a promotion is to outgrow your current position. And that's exactly what
Like
you
that.
did. You kind of outgrew your current position by doing
Mhm.
more than was expected of you. And so that opportunity just had to come. Those doors just had to open. So
Yeah.
that's really, really, really. And I was going to ask, were you excited? Were you scared when you were made manager? But it doesn't sound like you were scared at all. It just sounds like you just took it in your
Do you
stride.
know what? I don't think, and it's so weird again. I've always been quite a confident person. I always say this thing about my confidence came when I did GCSE drama. When I was a small child, I studied GCSE drama in secondary school. And from that moment, I realized I was good at acting and good at performing. I
Right.
just had confidence from then. And, getting, oh my gosh, people were like, oh, you're so good, all that praise that was good for me and it made me confident.
Mm,
But I think at the time, was I scared? Was I nervous? Not really, because I didn't see it as an onerous task. I saw it as just work. And I think again, because I've always had a really good work ethic. I've always worked really hard. I've always been a trier. So if you set me a new challenge or give me a new task, I'll take it. I'll run with it. I'll smash it. I like challenges. I like being challenged. I'm not going to say it's scary. And I think also it was a different time then. Like I'm talking 2014 when I started this job. When I started this job in 2014, like I was one of the youngest people in the courtroom. I think it was I just come off a master's, it was quite obvious I wasn't going to stay in that role, in that team, in that court forever. I was always
mm.
going to advance. And I think for those who saw it, it's like, oh, she's going somewhere. Let's see where she's getting to. Or others like, well, she's going somewhere. Let's get her on the journey. Let's push her along. So I wasn't scared. I saw it as just a great opportunity to just learn and do something different.
Yeah. Now, there was something you mentioned. You mentioned about humility. So
Mm.
tell me what role that's played on your journey.
All the best leaders are humble. I don't think you'd be a good leader and be arrogant. I think you
Mm,
have to have a level of humility, a level of self-awareness, and a level of just, yeah, self-awareness. Perspective is very important as a leader.
absolutely.
But I think for me, the humility comes from not thinking too much of yourself, but also not thinking of yourself too much. So it's like and this comes from my faith, I'm a Christian. So a lot of my leadership style comes from my faith. I'm a big
Mm,
fan of servant leadership. I'm a big fan
mm,
of having your heart, compassion in your leadership. That's why I love that. And that's not for everyone, but it works for me. And I
mm,
think when it comes to humility, I think it's about not trying to be that phrase, the sage on the stage when people want a guide by their side. You want to be someone that people can look up to without actually having to look up to. You want to be right
mm,
there, personable. And I think
mm.
it's something that I've always been a big fan of. I love people. Um, Thankfully, people love me as well. I tend to get along with people, and I find it really easy to build relationships with people. For me, humility looks like asking questions, not always going first. Just
Mm,
because you know doesn't mean you should do. And that's something that, again, you learn over time. I'm sure when I started, I was very headstrong. I knew it all. And I kind of had loads of ideas to change the world and change the court or the team or whatever. But as I've grown, as I've matured, I've realized there's a wisdom in sitting back. There's a wisdom in
yes.
observance, a wisdom in actually not going first. And I think
Mm,
now I enjoy that. So again, humility looks like allowing others to go before you. So when you're in a group setting, you don't have to answer first. Let others put their point across. When you know yourself, when you know the influence that you carry, it's so easy that people will latch on to what you say and what you do. But if you can hold back and let others go before you, you can even encourage them in what they're doing. And you can sort of cheer them on
absolutely.
rather than them saying, oh, well done to you, you can say well done to them. So humility looks like taking a step back, watching more, speaking less.
Mm, that is so powerful. I mean, I love what I'm hearing already. And when you say you're a people person, you love people, you're vibrant, the energy is just so palpable right now. I mean, we haven't, we've never spoken before. This is the first time we're speaking, but
That's true.
it feels like I've known you forever. So I
Oh,
can I can understand why your boss liked you, why your team would love you. I totally, totally get it. And to have that attitude of servant leadership. I mean, I think it's more and more leaders are embracing that
Yeah.
style of leadership. I think more can, especially the global leaders on the stage right
Mm.
now that we're hearing all about. I think some of them could really embrace that posture of servant leadership and taking a step back and listening and
Yeah.
hearing what people are saying. And like you say, coming alongside. I mean, I'm a big fan of John Maxwell. I'm part of the Maxwell leadership team. And he says a leader has to be far enough for people to follow. So
Yeah.
you have to see first, you have to be, one step ahead of the gang, or
Yeah.
why are you the leader, but close enough to actually feel the heart of the people as well. And
Yeah.
that's what you're
Yeah.
trying to describe when you say, you know, humility is people being able to look up to you without actually having to look up to
Yes.
you.
Yes.
So you're worth following, you're worth emulating, but people don't feel
Mm.
like you're so far removed from them that you're just unreachable, that you can still be approachable. I think that is such a powerful thing for
Yeah.
a leader.
Johnson Maxwell has a book about the 5 levels of leadership.
Yep.
About that servant leadership, I think part of the issue we have now is that a lot of leaders, for those who don't know, this book is really good. I suggest people should read it and buy it and whatever. But the first level is position. And I think for a lot of leaders, they're stuck in positional leadership. And I think
Absolutely, yeah.
it's a real challenge, especially now in 2025, where people want leaders who understand. They want leaders who care, leaders who have
Mm,
heart, who aren't afraid to show their heart. Not being overly emotional or overly familiar, but having compassion, having a
mm,
sense of feeling. That's what I think people want now. Given all that we've had to go through over the past couple of years, people want
yeah.
who cares about them. And I think a lot of leaders, sadly, the ones that I've seen in my life, I've been led by, managed by over the years, they're stuck in positional. They don't want to go beyond positional. And it's almost like a defense mechanism. It's almost like an insecurity. What's beyond your
Yes.
position? Because
Yeah.
leadership is more than just the title, And one thing that thinking back on my life and even looking at people that, I look at now, like people that I mentor and stuff, you lead before you have the title. And that's how you stand out. If you're waiting for the promotion or waiting for the job or waiting for someone to tell you you're now a leader, you've kind of already missed it. Because
Mm.
before you get there, you start doing the things you behave like a leader first. And then
And that's
things come after.
And that's what you were describing with that first role, isn't it? You were acting like a leader, and
Yeah.
the judge said, "Well, I think Stephanie's going to be a good leader. Let's give her the position."
Yeah.
And having positional leadership is not a bad thing. It just shows that somebody's noticed you're doing something
Yeah.
right. Somebody trusts you. Somebody's giving you an opportunity to now
Hmm.
grow as a leader. But
Yeah.
like you say, the problem now is when people get stuck at that
Mm.
level where everything is about the position.
Yeah.
Do what I say because I'm your boss. Remember, I'm your boss. If you have to keep reminding people all the time that you're their boss, then there's a problem. But like you say, of course, you can influence people, you can lead people without the position.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's quite interesting. But leadership is something I'm quite passionate about because I really think it affects all of our lives. I was just saying,
Yeah.
I'm a person of faith as well, and we were just listening to the news, my husband and I, this afternoon, and we were talking about Trump's sort of ultimatum to the Caribbean world and saying choose
Yeah.
wisely in a sense
Mhm.
between us and the Chinese. And I was saying to my husband, we really need to be praying for our leaders, our world leaders, more now
Absolutely.
than ever because the
Absolutely.
choices they make, the decisions they make affect us all.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know, as we've seen with Ukraine, what's going on in Ukraine, it's affecting the whole world. So leadership is so, so, so important. And with
Mm.
this podcast, what we're trying to do is, whatever level you may be, whatever, the journey is for
Mm.
you, to just bring people who have had some accomplishment, they've had their
Mhm.
journey to share some of their insights. But we're calling it a Life and Leadership podcast because we don't want it to just be about leadership. We want it to be about life because
Yeah.
it's not just about what you do when you're in the office. I mean, at home, how do you lead? How
Mhm.
has leadership shaped you as a person? So all of that we love to talk about. If you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. That will help us bring more inspiring conversations to you and reach more people. And if you know of a leader that should be featured on the Life and Leadership podcast, please reach out to us with their details. We would love to hear from you. But I'm
Yeah.
going to ask you now, Stephanie, what is your definition of leadership? If you were to define it, what would that be?
For me, leadership is about direction. I
Right.
think leadership looks like casting a vision and other people following that vision. I think if you're a leader, if you have a leader in your life and that you're led by, there's often a vision that you're following. They have to be able to cast a vision that people can follow and catch on to, and there have to be people following. But I also feel like leadership is about directing, because I'm noticing myself, the further on I go, I guess, as a leader, the less I do myself, the more I'm enabling others to do. And I guess now I'm at a stage where, I have 3 teams underneath me and managers underneath me. I'm not doing the work I used to do 10 years ago. I have teams who do that, but I'm helping them to do that work. How? Facilitating it, providing them the tools, almost greasing the wheels that enable them to do their job better, but do the work. And it's something that when I started, it really confused me, because I was like, oh, I missed the work. I need to do the work to feel like I'm doing something, but that's not leading. And leading is directing the people who are around us, supporting us. Whereas, when I was a manager, it was more making the decisions. I still make decisions now. I'm directing others to make the decisions. I'm not the one deciding it all. I don't have to. So I think for me, leadership is about 2 things. Number one, casting that vision. There has to be clarity of vision that people can follow and follow really well. And secondly, directing people. And a lot of that leadership for me, leadership has to be about enabling people to do their best work, to use their gifts, talents, skill sets, experience in the best way for the business, for the organization, whatever it is, for the family, but it's about enabling others. That's leadership to me.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. Vision is so important, because without a vision, what are we doing? Where are we going? Why are we here? So the vision is really, really important. But it's more than just having the vision. It's being able to cast the vision in such a way that it inspires others to want to achieve it. And I always say, when people micromanage, it's probably because they have failed in doing that. Because if we're all on the same page and we know why we're here, what we're trying to achieve, then to some degree you have to trust people in how they do what they do, knowing that they know where you want to go in the first place. But if people don't know where you want to go, then you will feel that need to give those directions at every point in time and telling people exactly how to do things, because you have something in your mind that you're trying to achieve, but you haven't been able to communicate that to others. And so you don't trust them enough to be creative in how they achieve that goal. So vision, I think, is really important. But the other thing you mentioned is empowerment. A leader empowers. And again, that is so powerful. And this is a struggle as a coach, as a leadership coach. This is a struggle that I find many people have, especially when you've just been given that position of leadership. People really struggle with letting go. When you talked about, well, I don't do that anymore, and they feel incompetent because they're not doing what they used to do. And I say to them, no, that's not your job now. Your job is to lead your team and to empower your team to do the job. That is the mark of a good leader, not struggling and contending with your team to want to do it with them.
I think it's interesting, because I think one of the challenges we have in the civil service, we have different grades, and it starts, AO, admin officer, then it goes to EO, executive officer, and it goes on, HO, high executive officer, and so on. When people move up the grades, you often find that somewhere in the middle, there's a tension, because you go from being the subject matter expert on a topic or area of the business to then being the person who manages the team who run that. But because you have the experience of that thing, letting go is not easy. Because what you then find is, they're not doing it the way that I used to do it.
Exactly.
That's not what I would, they must not know. And it comes down to sometimes something as simple as trust the team. It's not the way you would do it, but it doesn't mean it's bad. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just different to what you would do. But also, going back to my earlier point about humility, let me, and I'm going to use myself as an example, let me not think that I'm so perfect and so good and so capable that no one else could find a better or perhaps just as good a way to solve a problem. I think sometimes there is a bit of arrogance that comes with experience, because you've done something one way you could never, I mean, you can't comprehend it being done another way. And as
Yeah.
leaders, we have to learn to let go. And like you're saying, the struggle of, I feel incompetent because I'm not doing that work. It's not your
Mm.
work to do. Hand
Yeah.
it over, hand it across. And that's why I often tell people that I speak to, learn to delegate early. Because if you can delegate from early, you won't have that same issue with, oh, I'm really like torn between, do I work this or do I? And I often find people come across people who are still doing the work of 3 years ago because
Mm-hmm.
they never let go. And they still feel tied to that work. It's like, but that's not yours anymore. And actually, what you're doing, sadly, is you're not allowing that person in that job, in that role, in that position to grow because
Yeah.
they're not going to face the challenges you face because you're doing it for them. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, you're sowing mistrust in the team. Because if I think you, as my leader, do not trust me enough to do my job, I mean, you're not going to keep me, but also we're not going to have a good relationship. So it's more than just about you, it's about the impact on others as well.
Absolutely. And not only am I going to feel like you don't trust me and I want to leave, but it could cause people to have what they call quiet quitting, where they
Yeah,
might
yeah,
even still be there, but they're just doing
yes.
the bare minimum
Bare
because
minimum, absolutely.
I'm never going to satisfy them anyway. So
Yeah,
I'm just going to do
yeah.
what I can do. And it's really, really, really bad, really, really bad.
Mm,
And it kind of puts you in bondage as well as a leader. You can't just switch off and go on holiday without checking your emails and
yeah,
wanting to check and check to make sure everything is going on well.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, we
yeah.
talk about work-life balance for leaders. The
Mm,
quickest way to achieve work-life balance is to empower those on your team.
there we
So you
go.
don't feel like
There we
you
go.
have to be there all the time checking everything.
Mm.
No, 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 really, really, really powerful. I'm going to ask you then, if you were to, I think I probably have an idea what you're going to say, but if you were to pick three traits that you would say these three traits are non-negotiable for a good leader, what will those three be?
The most important trait for me as a leader is character.
Mm,
I think if you want to be a good leader, you have to have a good character because character is who you really are. Reputation is who people think you are.
yeah.
And I think as a leader, you have to have the character that, well, your values must include integrity, honesty, fairness, things like that. You have to have a good character. That's number one. The second thing I would say, not in order, competence. It's hard to be a good leader if you are incompetent. And that's not to say that people can't grow and you can't be stretched into a role. But if you are doing bad, if you are failing, if you are performing below the desired standard, you will not lead well because your team will not have faith in your ability. And I think part of leading is inspiring others to work harder than they're currently working, or just inspiring your team that things get better. They should stay for the journey because we're going in the right direction, things like that.
Yeah.
So I think competence is important, whether that means you have the qualification under your belt, whether that means you have the experience, or just you belong to, you deserve to be who you are. You belong in your position. Having
Mm-hmm.
competence is good. People are watching you. They're observing. They might not say it to your face, but they're checking to see what you're doing. So character and competence, two big things. Third, I'm going to say compassion. Like I said earlier, my favorite leaders are leaders who show their heart. My least favorite leaders have been leaders who have been robotic,
Mm.
who have been almost sterile, I'll be honest, like no feeling, no sort of understanding. And I'll be honest, currently there's a word that people are using, which is almost feel like a buzzword, authentic leadership, authentic self. A lot of people are using the phrase authenticity, but not actually becoming or showing any sort of authenticity. So I
Mm.
think actually having compassion for people, for circumstances, and that goes across the board, no matter what you do. Like in my bio, you mentioned I've worked across all these different things, and I've done work in domestic abuse, hate crime, counter extremism, immigration, asylum work. You have to have compassion. You can't treat it as just the numbers thing. You
Mm.
can't treat it as just pieces of paper. You have to have compassion. And I think especially in the industry that I work in transport law at the moment. And we have 5,000 people in our agency. They all have different stories, different experiences. I can't treat them all the same. I have to be humble enough, going back to that phrase, to learn their stories and understand where they've come from. But compassion is massive. I think if you have compassion, you put people off. And yeah, it repels people. Compassion is massive. No particular order: character, competence, and compassion.
And I love those three C's. I really do. I think all of them are really important. Again, referring to John Maxwell, he says, it's only a matter of time. So he obviously, so going back to that 5 levels of leadership, talks about
Yeah.
positional leadership, and then he talks about, the next one is permission leadership, where you start to build relationships.
Yeah.
But then he goes on to the need for you as a leader to go beyond just that permission leadership, where people are letting you lead them because you've built a relationship with them, to where
Yeah.
people have trust in you, in your competence, in the results you're getting, where they can say, oh yes, since Stephanie joined this team, we've been winning. So now they have a different level of respect for you. So they're not just following you because they like you, even though liking you is important, but they're following you because they have belief in your
Yes,
competence.
that's
And
good.
so that's really, really important. But also you talked about compassion. And again, that's important. Empathy, being an empathetic leader. And I got a leader on this podcast a few months ago now, and he was talking about how difficult it is for high performers to be empathetic because you have a certain level that you operate on, and you have a certain expectation because you've been promoted, because like you were saying, you have a certain level that you operate on, and so you're really good at your job. And so when you get promoted, it can be difficult to empathize with others because you're expecting everybody to be exactly how you were, without realizing that everybody has their own different strengths that they bring to the team. And so if you can just be patient and again take that step back and look at your team and see where their strengths lie, then you can begin to harness that to build a really strong team. And when you talk about authenticity, I just smiled because everything about you, Stephanie, is authentic.
Oh.
Honestly, but it really is. And I say that, completely hand on heart.
The Life and Leadership Podcast is brought to you by Can Do Academy, where we help organizations develop high-performing teams and extraordinary leaders. To find out more about our work, visit candoacademy.net. And do join us for part 2 of this episode.
Thank you for listening to the Life and Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, hit the subscribe button. That will help us reach more people and inspire more leaders. See you on the next episode.